Welcome to Ascension with V, where we talk about spiritual awakening, ascension, and everything in between. I'm your host, Stashia Jeanette, aka V, and today we have a special guest who's about to take us on a journey with their unique experiences and gifts. Brandy Anderson, you have an amazing book called Through the Veil that is out and people are able to check out and read. I want to know all the things about how we got to this point. How did you get to where you were like, I've got this gift. I'm now able to communicate with my grandmother. I want to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 2014, I had a spiritual awakening, and that sent me on a journey of just seeking out ultimate truth. And I
Okay.
spent several years in the church, just sifting through all of the theological nuances, trying to iron out a theology that I could rest in. And
Right.
ultimately, I found mainstream Christian answers to life's most important questions just less than satisfying. And from there, I sort of went into a more contemplative space. So it was more experiential, less, conceptual. And in that space, from within that space, my grandmother was nearing the end of her life. And so when she crossed, I should back up and say that when we are nearing the end of our physical lives, the veil between the spiritual and the physical becomes thin.
Hmm.
And at the time of our actual crossing, that thin veil opens into a portal and we slip through, and it's usually an instantaneous phenomenon.
Right.
But my grandmother resisted death. She had an aversion to death. She did not want to die. She was afraid of death. And so, in her resisting, she initially became stuck in her crossing,
Yeah.
and it caused her portal to remain open. And but within a short amount of time, she became unstuck. She gained some perspective about her situation and was able to go ahead and cross. But her portal at that point was open still
Right.
because she had been stuck. And because of this, it allowed her to be able to manipulate the physical realm in ways that she would not have been able to without a portal. And so a month or so after she crossed, she reached out for the first time. She turned the television on. It's a Roku smart TV. And so she
Okay.
turned the television on. She navigated to the search bar and she typed the word hello. And my family who live in that house ran out of the house screaming in fright, like they were completely horrified. And and then, so as soon as they were afraid, the activity stopped, the TV shut off. But then in a couple of days, it happened again. This time the TV popped on, navigated to the search, and the word love appeared in the search bar. But my family still, they were having none of that. Still, they ran out shrieking in fright.
Right.
And this it persisted. She would continually try to reach out, and it would just unnerve my family. My aunt actually moved out. She was so rattled by it. And they would call me, panicked, like what to
Right.
do. And they had, they saged and prayed and cleansed in case it was something malevolent. And they tried to determine if it was someone in the physical realm playing a joke, like maybe a hacker. They looked at the cameras on the perimeter. And
Right.
ultimately, they just couldn't, figure out the source of it. And it persisted.
Um,
So eventually I said, why don't I come over and we'll look into it and just see, engage with whoever or whatever it is and try to get to the bottom of this. And in my mind, I really thought it was someone probably in the physical manipulating the television somehow.
right.
But then in the back of my mind, I was like, but what if it is Granny? You know?
Right.
So either way, we need to figure out what this is. So, so I went over and while I was there, we didn't attempt communication. I just was there. I was just in their living room. And
Right.
during my visit, the television popped on by itself, navigated to the search, and everyone in the house was like, "Oh my gosh, it's happening!" And I
It's
was like,
happening.
"Everybody, just be calm. We'll just figure." Yeah, yeah, because it had been such a source of fear for them.
Right.
So
Right.
as whoever it was began to communicate, they came through as Granny, but we weren't sure about that.
Right.
So tentatively, we engaged with the communication, and pretty quickly we determined that it could not be someone in the physical realm, like a hacker or anything like that, because whoever it was could read our thoughts, and that rocked us.
Yeah.
We would have a thought, like we would be thinking of a question or something that we were going to say. And before we actually articulated it, the response would be issued, typed out on the television.
Right.
And I was like, can you read our thoughts? And she said, yes. So we started to test it, like we would think something and wait. And I mean, without fail, just the answers, the responses were prompt and accurate for what we were thinking. So I was like, okay, so this is definitely something spiritual, but is it Granny?
Right.
We were
Right.
afraid it could be
No.
something malevolent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And coming from a Christian background, there's a lot of, a lot of the idea that you can't speak to your loved ones on the other side, that it would have to be demons. It can't be,
Right.
all of that was kind of swirling around in our thought process as we engaged. And so we didn't want to entertain demons, or something
Exactly.
malevolent. So we continued to communicate, but just kind of slowly, with trepidation to see, and it became apparent that it was my grandmother, and that she had stayed to reconcile some relationships. She wanted to apologize for some past hurts, things that she needed to say to some people, to bring about healing. Also, when we cross, we have like a bigger vantage point. We're able to see into the heart of situations and people with clarity. And
Right.
from that more expansive view of reality, that clearer view, she could see some patterns in people's lives that were deeply destructive. And so she
Yeah.
spoke into that in a way that brought a lot of healing. And she could see people struggling with some mental health issues. And she spoke into that in a way that saved lives.
Right.
So all of the communication was centered around, bringing about health and wholeness,
Yeah.
and wrapped in love. And none of it, was fearful. If it was something malevolent, it would have stirred up dissension or created fear and
Right.
intimidation, that kind of thing. And we've had sustained communication with my grandmother for the past 3 years, and the fruit of it has been nothing but good. Jesus
Right.
said, "You will know them by their fruit." Well, the fruit of it has been nothing but consistently good. It's always geared toward health and wholeness.
Right.
And so, but because we had access to my grandmother, I took the opportunity to ask a lot of theological, philosophical questions because of
Right.
my journey.
Exactly.
I was on a conscious spiritual journey. So she didn't stay to tell me these things. That wasn't her motive in staying and in communicating and reaching out.
Right.
But she has graciously put up with my questions and answered a lot of them. And which, is it's a huge
A
gift,
huge deal.
to
Right.
me. Yeah. So yeah, it's
Right.
just a huge gift. And but her reason for staying wasn't to answer these questions or give me this information. Her reason for staying was definitely because of her love and devotion to particular family members,
Yeah. To try
and her
to like
concern for
right
them.
wrongs. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and heal relationships.
Yeah. So your spiritual awakening journey, what was that like for you?
Well, I came from a Christian background. My parents, my family, all Christian, context. But at the time of my spiritual awakening, I really wasn't practicing any form of religion. I wasn't plugged into any churches. I was not on a conscious spiritual journey, although everyone's on a spiritual journey, whether they know
Right.
it or not.
Right.
So I was just doing my thing, just living my life. Just out of nowhere, a depression hit me. And
Mm,
it was, things ebb and flow. We have,
right.
highs and lows. And in my whole life, I've never, been given to clinical depression.
Right.
But I have seasons of, depression. Everyone has ups and downs. And
Right.
so in my mind, I thought, well, it'll lift,
Yeah.
So every day that I felt this intense heaviness, I would just think, well, it'll lift,
Little-
things come and go. It's just a season. But it
Right.
didn't lift, it persisted. And it was just really
Mm,
weighing me down. And it got heavier and heavier. And I see now, looking back in retrospect, that it was definitely philosophical, depression. It was not clinical depression. It was
yeah.
existential dread, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it finally it culminated into this. I just couldn't take it anymore. And one morning I woke up and I remember thinking, I just can't take this anymore. And I cried out to God, but it wasn't a pious prayer. It was more of a provocative prayer, really, because I just unleashed my frustrations
Yeah.
out into the atmosphere. And it was really more of a if you are there kind of prayer. Like I wasn't even sure what
Right.
I believed about God. And, I was just so miserable.
Right.
And in the midst of that, I remember I was just so many emotions. I was speaking verbally, like, I was saying things out loud. And in the swirl of all of that chaotic emotion and energy just swirling around me, I heard a voice as loud and clear as anything I've ever heard in my life. And it just said, "Be still." And instant peace washed over me. It was like nothing I had ever experienced. And
Right.
in that moment, I remember thinking, I know this is God. Like did like whatever just happened with whatever this is God, and I need to figure out, I need a context for it, like
Right.
a foundation for, like I need a way to articulate what has happened to me. See, I
Yes.
didn't even have, a theology that I could use to sort of make sense of what had just happened. So all I knew to do was to plug into church because that was the context that my family, was coming from.
It's coming from.
So I
Yeah.
did. I plugged into several churches over the course of years, and I just began to study and read and just really dig in. And, I'm the kind of person that I don't just take someone's word. Like I want to study it out and see it
Yeah.
for myself. And
Yes. Exactly.
so, like with all of these different doctrines, like, you have the doctrines of hell, you have the doctrines of, like the atonement theories. And, I didn't just go with whichever popular one was presented. Like
Was
I read volumes and read
yeah.
script poured through the Bible and just really dug
Doug.
down into it.
Doug.
And ultimately, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I just had to, I just wanted truth. I was like, I just
Exactly.
want truth at all
That.
cost, even if it
That.
blows my life apart. Yeah.
That. Yes. Yes.
So, yeah. And it ultimately brought me to a place where I'm like, this is not it. Like, whatever it was that I experienced in my awakening,
Mhm.
I didn't find it in the church. I didn't find it in their doctrines and their
Yeah.
ideologies. And I did all the things, if they said get in a group, I got in a group. If they
Yeah.
said lead a group, I led groups. All of the things, join a
Yeah.
serve team, do this, do that. I was desperately looking for that
Trying.
peace,
Yes.
whatever, that would transform me into, yeah, I was like, how do I get to that experience that I had? How
Yes.
do I get that?
Yes.
And yeah, all of it just fell short.
Just
So
wasn't it.
yeah, I wouldn't say, yeah, and it's not Christianity, it's mainstream Christian theology,
Yeah.
that's the real issue. So
Yes.
yeah, so ultimately that's what kind of brought me into a more contemplative or mystical space, would maybe be a
Thanks.
better way to articulate it.
Yeah. So now, what is your viewpoint and thoughts on organized religion and how it kind of has muddied the water of what the truth of the divine actually is? There's this thing, and I say it frequently, where it's like mainstream religion wants you to look outside of yourself for that connection to God. Like, for example, going to the pastor when you have a problem, like let the church and congregation pray for you. Let the pastor, why do you have to have a middleman to build a relationship with the divine?
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally been my experience. And the way that, and I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. It's, we can't, we get cut off from our intuition in these churches because we're taught that
Yeah.
we can't trust ourselves. And they
Yeah.
say the heart is deceitful above all things,
Yes.
and that one verse, they sever you from the voice of God because
Immediately.
your intuition is the voice of God. And yeah. So, Elijah, he heard God, not in the storm, not in the loud externals or whatever, not in the fire, not in the, he heard God in the still small voice, very much an inner
Right.
voice, that
Exactly.
intuitive, you have to still yourself and be quiet to tap into it, but it's there.
Right.
And yeah, and the church just keeps us kind of isolated from that. And like you were saying also, that you have to trust external authorities. It's always either the Bible or a pastor or there, some external doctrine or
Something.
something.
Right.
So, and it keeps us, yeah, in this perpetual loop of, it's just really false self pandering is what it is.
Right.
Like you put on this shiny exterior because you think, okay, so I've said the prayer, I'm saved, I've been baptized, I'll go to heaven when I die. But, as far as, actually having any kind of inward shift, that's a
Hmm.
whole other matter. And I'm not saying people can't have that in church, because certainly
Right.
you can have that anywhere. You can
Right.
awaken in any, context. But for
Right.
me, I found that the church was mostly an impediment to that kind of awakening, because it keeps you trapped in a space where
Yeah.
it's just not possible. So you have to almost bust
Exactly.
through all of that, yeah, transcend it to actually get the, the full,
The full
I would
effect
say.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this shift, in this realization that you had, what was some of the key points that you noticed when you started communicating with your grandmother? Like, hey, these were some of the things that I did not learn in church. And like speaking on reincarnation, how did you come upon that topic with it?
Yeah. So, well, by the time that my grandmother came through, I had already shifted out of that mainstream evangelical type, theology.
Yeah.
And so I was already, a lot of the things that I was asking my grandmother about and things that she just served to kind of validate where I was already leaning, maybe bring it into a little sharper focus for me. Things like universal reconciliation. I had already, left behind the view of eternal conscious torment. And
Right.
while I wouldn't say with certainty that universal reconciliation was truth, because you can't conclusively, there is no way to say conclusively.
Right.
I definitely leaned in that direction and felt like that was, the likely truth.
Right.
But I was able to ask my grandmother, and she was able to confirm, and then, tie some scriptures in there, and like validate and connect dots, which was super helpful. But the one thing that she did share with me that was not, well, not the only thing, but the one probably primary thing that she shared with me that was not part of my worldview is that reincarnation is true. And it was
Hmm.
because I asked. Because I'm coming from a Christian perspective, but I also, Buddhist theology or
Right.
philosophy has been super helpful for me in kind of processing my own faith,
Right.
Christian faith.
Right.
So I'm not a Buddhist, but it resonates. Buddhism resonates, and so, and I have read the Hindu, like the Bhagavad Gita. So like the Hindu scriptures and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and so I had a lot
Yeah.
of like Eastern thought kind of
Yeah.
swirling around, and so I would ask her, I wanted to ask her some of these things. I was like, is the Tibetan Book of the Dead an accurate way? Is that like when we pass, is that how it is? And she said, some, it's like that a little bit, but it's not entirely the way that
That.
it's depicted, throughout that book.
Right.
But it does offer a more helpful view than the mainstream Christian view. Obviously, they get it
Yes.
completely wrong.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And yeah, but when I said, is reincarnation true? And she said, yes, I was like, wow. See, this
Hmm.
changes everything for me, because coming from a Christian perspective, that just was not ever a part of my worldview.
Right.
And I had, like seen on television and read accounts of children with past life memories where their memories had been validated, just very explicit memories about a past life. And they were able to go to those places and interview the family members and really just validate what these children were remembering. And
Right.
I found that really compelling, but I didn't know what to do with it. I would think, wow, that sounds true. Sounds like
Yes.
they are
Right.
reincarnated. I can't think of another explanation for that.
Right.
But I didn't have, like a
The
theological
proof.
framework for it.
Yeah.
So after she told me, yeah. So after she told me that it was true, I began to like dig into it more myself. Like I read some stuff, poured back over scriptures, just kind of. And when you begin to see though that reincarnation is actually mentioned in scripture,
Hmm.
it's there, but it's glossed over or explained away in
Exactly.
mainstream church. Like
Exactly.
yeah, the disciples asked Jesus, when they came upon the man born blind, they were like, who sinned, this man or his parents, that this man be born blind? And Jesus said, well, first of all, the fact that they asked, could the man have sinned to be born blind? Was it his own sin that caused him to be born blind? That means that they believed in karmic past life
Right.
accumulation of sins, because a person, how could you sin to cause yourself to be born blind if there
Born
are no
like that.
past lives?
Right.
Um, yeah. And Jesus, he responded by saying it really doesn't matter whether this man or his parents sinned or whatever. We're here to bring the light, just
Right.
alleviate suffering when we can.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, reincarnation definitely was the primary thing that she shared that shifted things the most for me.
Nice. I mean, like it's a mind-blowing concept, and especially when you're able to get that kind of reassurance and validation, especially, from her, and taking in accountability of, okay, so this is now something that I can dig into. This is something that I can now put my focus into. Reincarnation has been the most, I think, fascinating and is topic that a lot of people have, I think, wondered about and wanted to know more about, and you kind of got the inside scoop with it here. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
it's like you got the crack open of the Pandora's box, you know what I mean? So segueing into the
Yeah.
next question, how do you reconcile reincarnation with the idea of heaven?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think the reason that reincarnation is not a part of mainstream Christian theology is because it seems it contradicts their theology of, eternal conscious torment or heaven as like a final destination.
Right.
Um, but when you begin to see that heaven's not a place we go to, it's a place we come from.
Right.
And, we are all perpetually in flux continually. There is no destination. Life is not a destination. It's a journey,
Right.
both here and on the other side. You begin to see that reincarnation doesn't violate Christianity. It just violates mainstream Christian theology.
Yes.
So yeah, we can cultivate heaven now. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Right.
So it's not about it's not about saying a prayer and floating away to a place called heaven when we die. It's about transcending the ego now
Mm-hmm.
and experiencing peace, inner peace, alignment, inner integrity now. And we carry whatever level of consciousness we have attained, we carry that with us in our crossing. And so reincarnation really is just a testament to the grace of God, because we are afforded unlimited opportunities to cycle through and learn our lessons, and experience life in a multitude of ways. We could, experience various, genders,
Exactly.
various cultures, all kinds of experiences that we, no way could one person experience everything life has to
Everything
offer in one short
in one
physical
lifetime.
life.
Yes.
Right. And when you believe that you're given this one short physical life to figure everything out, check all of the boxes, get everything right, or you'll go to
Right.
heaven, or you'll go to heaven, or you'll go to hell for all eternity if you don't get it right. That's a very nihilistic view of
Right.
reality. I mean,
But it's a
some
view
people,
that we
their
all,
lives are cut short.
yeah, but that's a view that, like, a lot of us have been conditioned and programmed to have and think. Like, that's a thing. So what is now the view of hell in light of incarnation? Like, what is that shift now?
Yeah. Yeah. When you do see that heaven is a state of being, you
Mm-hmm.
begin to see that hell also is a state of being.
Yes.
Jeff Foster said, heaven is this moment, and hell is the burning desire for this moment to be different. And I
Right.
think that sums it up quite nicely. Heaven is being fully present in the moment. That really is what heaven is. It's to be
Right.
properly aligned, to
Exactly.
allow life to flow through us, not lost in thought and distracted by our worries. If we're in thought, we're
Circumstances.
either in the future, which there's nothing but worry, yeah,
Right.
or we're in the past where there's nothing but regret. So yeah, hell is just being out of alignment and living our lives from a false persona, that mask that
Right.
we all wear in the world.
Right.
Yeah, to being conditioned. It's the conditioned mind. In fact, the ego is the perpetuator of all evil. So yeah, it's just It's just about shifting our perspective and realizing we can have heaven now. In our incarnation, we can experience what the kingdom of heaven is. But also, I should say that while there is no final destination for the wicked in a place called hell where they'll suffer eternal conscious torment, there is a fire, according to my grandmother, on the other side that everyone
Yeah.
passes through.
Yeah.
And this fire is a purifying, a cleansing fire. Yeah.
Right.
And so it's not retributive, it's restorative, and it's intended to just burn away all of anything that interferes with love. And it can be particularly painful for people who have not done their inner work, people who basically, if your inner condition is, the environment of a
Rough.
hell, now
Rough.
you take that with you,
Rough.
then you'll have to contend with that on the, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. So it's just about, yeah, shifting now, realizing the importance of awakening now and not
Mhm.
saving it, to some after death, um, you
Thing.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and,
yeah.
and I think that you brought up a good point of where it is. I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, if there's no actual hell now, like, then I can just be out here where, willy nilly doing whatever, just be acting a fool and there's no repercussions on that. And like, that's not a, that's not a thing. Like, no, you gonna feel that. You are going, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna deal with it. But do you think that
Yeah.
people have the question of saying, is there even a good and evil?
Mm. Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah. I think, thing is, evil is not nothing. We
Right,
feel it. We perceive it. But I would say evil is relatively real. It wreaks
right,
havoc in this world that we live in, but
right,
ultimately it is not real. Ultimately, it's an illusion because it's born out of our ego, which that also is illusory.
right,
Um, a little nuance to that or whatever. Does evil exist? Yes, relatively it does. And it clearly grips the world in
right,
palpable ways. But ultimately, evil will cease to exist because it lacks any kind of substantial existence in and of itself. It's born out of our egos.
right. How do people interpret what the ego is in different ways? Like, I know within the spiritual community, we'll say, like, you have like the death of the ego and dark night of the soul and, doing the shadow work. But what do people outside of the spiritual community relate the ego to? Like, what is a layman's term that people outside of the spiritual community would know,
Yeah.
relate ego?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that, the ego is okay. So I would say that we have the persona, which is our false self. It's the mask that we wear in the world. It's how we want to be seen, it's how we present ourselves. And we
Right,
develop this beginning in childhood from our earliest memories, from our earliest days in our incarnation, because of our family of origin, whatever our context is, whatever we're coming from, we are conditioned. We learn ways of coping in our world. We learn ways what's acceptable, what's unacceptable,
right,
and in order to survive in our families and to be, not get in trouble, to be thought well of, to be
yeah,
rewarded, we learn what we need to do or not do, and
right,
so we begin to wear a mask. And the things that are unacceptable that our family tells us, these things are unacceptable. We repress those things. We push those things down into what would be called the shadow. That's what the shadow is. The shadow's not bad. It's just
no,
unconscious.
exact,
It's the parts of ourselves that we have denied,
yeah,
things that we don't want.
yes,
And they're
exactly,
not necessarily bad things, I should say. Your gold is in
exactly,
your
right,
shadow too.
right,
Your best talents are pushed into that shadow. It's things
yeah,
that maybe you are reprimanded for by your family, as too much or,
right,
overwhelming to your family. And so you learn to just shove those things down, but maybe they're your best gifts.
exactly,
So we operate in the world from a place of inauthenticity,
mhm,
beginning from our childhood. And it becomes so ingrained, so conditioned that we don't even realize we're doing it. I mean, it's just
right,
an automatic. And the early years in our life, we are deep, heavy in our egos. And then finally, we come to a place where maybe we exhaust the limits of this
yeah,
ego. The persona it comes to a point where it doesn't it doesn't work anymore. We realize that it's the limitations. We hit a wall.
Yeah.
And that usually presents in like existential angst, depression, that kind of thing. And because all of life is designed to awaken us, that's just the universe's way of saying, hey, wake up out of this slumber and get out
Number.
of this false way of operating. Yeah. And get into alignment. It's life's way of trying to wake us up out of the illusion.
Right.
But yeah, so I would say that that's what the ego is. And we don't kill the ego.
Right.
The ego really is what keeps us tethered to this world of form. If we were to kill the ego, we would cease to be incarnated. You transcend the ego. And by transcend, what you do, you have to bring what's in that shadow to light, all of the
Right.
things that you denied, repressed about yourself, welcome that with compassion, and
Mm.
bring everything into balance.
Yeah.
And I personally think that that's a lot of the issue in the church, is that people aren't actually doing this shadow work. They're not
That
actually coming into alignment or being taught how to,
that
yeah, instead they're just putting on this
math.
churchy veneer. And
Correct.
so it's the false self. It's just a religious false self. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think it's Ken Wilber said that most of the church is just the false self dressed in drag. And he was
Yeah.
so right, because that's what it is. People just shift. They just shift into the church, and then they still have the false self, but now it's a religious false self. It's a
Right.
spiritual false self.
Right.
Um, yeah, so it keeps people very
Duh.
fragmented, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you believe that you have done the right things and you're going to heaven when you
This.
die, you are
This.
stuck, because
This.
you don't dig in anymore. You don't question, you don't seek.
Yes.
You're like, "Oh, I have
Yes.
arrived." And that is the worst place to be, because
It's the
we never
worst.
arrive. I mean, they're
No.
continually in. Yeah.
Yeah, I have said this so much to people where I'm like, holy cow, did they do a number on us and the people of this planet? Like, so many people are just enslaved, and I feel terrible because they inherently really think that they have done the right thing to like get that that
Oh,
stamp of
yeah.
approval or that gold star, the all the things, the all access pass, right? And little do they know they're just stuck, like stagnant and stuck.
I know.
And it's just like
Yeah, and I mean that. Yeah, I mean I get it, because I have been there. I mean,
it'll
we all,
same,
like anybody who has passed through that system. Yeah.
right?
So it's like no judgment. I get it. But it's sad though when I see people who are so entrenched in it that they cannot hear.
At
Because
all.
even when I was in it, like I passed through it. Yeah, I was still very open to
Right.
hearing alternate views. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm
Right.
going to accept a view, but like I want, but truth is the most important thing to me. And
Yeah.
so, not my idea of what's comfortable, not my
Yes.
social group. See, that's another thing. People are plugged into the church. That's their
The
whole world,
comfort.
their social activities, everything. Yeah. And so to deconstruct that,
Yeah.
step away from that would be to alienate, isolate yourself. And it's
Yeah.
frightening.
Yeah,
But yeah, for me, that wasn't an issue.
that isolation phase is like
Go
needed
ahead.
though. Do you know what I mean? Like you find yourself and who you really
Yeah,
are in solidarity. Like that's just a part of it. But you're right. That's a huge component to why a lot of people don't want to step outside of the traditional organized religion thing, because it requires them now to be alone and then also to have to embrace this whole new perspective of things on their own, and it is just,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's really bad. Like it's really bad to think of, again, you and I, like, and I'm sure other people, we saw it and we were open to, again, knowing, hey, maybe there's something else, but there's a lot of people who it's just like hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Like it's just I don't want to talk about it. Everything is all about what's happening here within the church and the pastor and the congregation, and this is the thing, and that's it.
Yeah.
Have you faced
Yeah.
backlash from people who have known you when you were in the organized religion?
Yeah, a little bit. Because, I passed through the church rather quickly. I mean, it was years, that I spent, studying out everything, plugged into the church in that capacity. So, I mean, it was several years, but
Right.
I wasn't one of those people who had just been in it since birth. And even as
Right.
I journeyed through it, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was always questioning and, and studying and learning and seeking truth. That's the
Right.
thing. I want truth at all costs. And so I don't know. I wasn't what's the word? I guess I wasn't overly concerned with those connections. I mean, not that I didn't value the people that I met or whatever, but I could easily let that go if it took me in another direction. Like
Right.
I realized, I
Exactly.
recognize that
Exactly.
not all people are my people, and that's okay.
That.
But I have had some people that, they pushed back a little bit, like maybe on social media when they saw, they would, argue a little bit. And it was always, it's like, I'm telling you this in love. And then they would proceed to tell me, hey, you're basically in a very kind way saying you're going to go to hell if you don't
y-
believe these things and do these
Yes.
things. It's very fear based,
Yes.
very conform to my way of thinking
Or
so that you
that's
don't go
it.
to hell. But I don't
Or
want to hear
that's
what
it.
you're thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, this is like, yeah. So, and when I would push back against that, they would unfriend me. So they really didn't push
Yes.
back so much as they just dropped off, which, you expect
Yeah.
that. I mean, because
Exactly.
energy, the law of attraction, right? We're all vibrating at different frequencies. And so
Right.
the universe will just remove people who are not your people. And
Yep.
so what
Yep.
I'm not sharing to convince anyone or convert
No.
anyone or say, hey, I have all the answers, come do things my way,
Correct.
but I
But it
share
is
from
an
my own lived
invitation.
experience what has been powerful, transformative for me, and anyone that it resonates with, great. I'm happy
Hmm.
that it can be helpful. But if it doesn't
Exactly.
resonate, if that's not your channel, that's fine.
It's
Just,
good.
do you. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of
Yes.
where I am with it. Yeah.
Yes, and that's how you have to be, because it is as you change and ascend and grow and evolve and all and he do all the healing and the shadow work and all the things you do, like the energetic dissonance becomes so high, where like you said, a lot of people just like they just can't, they can't converse with you,
Yeah.
speak with you, be around you even, and that's just how it is. That's just part of the way of the universe, part of life. Also, on this
Yeah.
topic, I wanted to ask you about the purpose and meaning of life. How has that been shaped for you at this point in time? Like, where are you on that view?
I would say, simply put, the meaning of life, the purpose of life is to awaken.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so all of life is designed to awaken us.
Right.
That's the whole karmic cycle and reincarnation. I mean, life is not happening to you; it's happening for you.
For
And
you.
there are no
Yeah.
obstacles along the path because the obstacles are the path. And so
Right.
that's very true. That's the nature of ultimate reality. And ultimately, we all do come into alignment, whether now or later. Of course, if we resist it, and the longer we resist it, we suffer. But
Exactly.
ultimately, everyone will be made whole. We'll come into alignment. But people say they want to know the meaning of life, and I'm a spiritual director and Jungian coach, and so that's the first thing when people come to me. That's what everyone is articulating, right? It's I feel like there's something more. There's something missing, and what is the meaning of my life? What am I supposed to do? And they're grasping for something to kind
Yes,
of
for
fill that void
something
and give them a
desperately.
sense of peace and wholeness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was Joseph Campbell who said, people say they want to know the meaning of life, but he said, I don't think that's true. What people want is to feel the rapture of being alive. And
Right.
that is it. People are alienated from themselves. They don't
Yep.
even know they are.
Yep.
If they're in the church, they really have they
They
really have
really,
the wrong idea. And
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so they can't imagine why life is not going well. It's like, I've checked all the boxes. I'm doing the things. And
Yeah.
so why don't I have a sense of peace and satisfaction in this life? And
Right.
so it's about coming back to your true self. that self that you have denied your true essence, who God created you to be. You're created in the image of God, a God who
Exactly.
is love. And so you're created in the image of love. Your true identity is love. And
Yep.
so it's about coming back to that. It's about shedding off. So it's not about learning or adding anything. It's about unlearning
Unlearning.
and shedding some things.
Unlearning.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is the meaning of life. It's to awaken out of that false, that
Yes.
illusion, this, all of these superficial things that do not matter, and getting back to the core of who we are, where we can enjoy life, where where life flows through us.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
See, you, I don't know where you've been all my life, but literally I've said these things so frequently, and like everyone would just look at me like this big purple unicorn, whenever I'm trying to like,
Yeah.
and like you're just out here speaking nonsense, and I'm like, nah, man, y'all are going the wrong way. Like I'm trying to help, and but
Yeah.
you get it. I have been resuscitated 7 times. So like the life
Wow.
of the life and death thing, is it's a game changer,
Yeah.
you know. But
Right. You
literally
know,
every go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say everything that you have said are things that I can like co-sign on and be like, yep, because I've lived it. you know
Yeah.
so when you came across on
Yeah.
my threads and you mentioned you know this, I was like, oh, we gotta talk, because this is she knows some things that I've been through.
Yeah. And see, I think the universe does that. I mean, that, like you said, where have you been all my life? That's the universe brought us together for a reason. It's that vibration thing. Who your people will come to you if you just do you, and don't
Be
worry
your
about who's
authentic
falling
self.
away.
Yes.
Um, yeah, authenticity, right? That's what it's about. And then um, also, you mentioned the whole life and death dichotomy. That is in this Western culture. That is a thing. We have euphemisms for death. People don't want to talk about death. We avoid death.
Right.
Trying to live longer. And so we're not in touch with it in a way that it could actually lead us into any kind of transformation or awakening or whatever, because we avoid it. We're like
Right.
whistling past the graveyard. We don't want to think about it, talk about it. And
Right.
so, yeah, it would be, in other cultures, they do like um, well, we just celebrated the
We
Day
just
of the
had Day
Dead,
of the
right? But
Dead.
that's by
Yeah.
and large just it's a holiday. Yeah, it's in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's highly it's celebrated there. And
Exactly.
here in the Western world, no way.
They're
We
like,
don't want to
oh
celebrate
no.
death.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But that we do need to face our own mortality, memento mori, right? We face your own mortality so that you can become a whole person.
Right. I think that's something that, most people will always have, that like, oh no, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the death thing. But I think by me trying to talk about, my multiple deaths and rebirths, the resuscitations things, and what you're talking about with your experiences with it, like, I think it's at least opening the gates of it, like, to not be so taboo, so scary, so, do you know what I'm saying? Because it is, you got 2 people here
Yeah,
who've dealt with it. So it's, like it's kind of like giving like a peek
yeah,
behind the curtain, where before it
yeah.
was just kind of the scary phenomenon.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know, the last
yeah.
thing that I
See, and that's. Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, because it is an unknown factor, there's a lot of fear around death, because it's
Hmm.
not. I think if we were to talk about it more and face it more in this culture, there
Right,
would be a lot less fear around it, for
right.
sure.
And even in like in Egyptian cultures, like when people would die, they'd have a whole ceremony of things, wrap the organs up, and bring the offering, bring like fruit
Yeah,
and things for the, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a whole
yeah,
thing. But it's just here, like hear it, it's just
Yeah.
like a weird thing that just people don't want to talk about. Anyways, but I feel like we're making good
No.
headway with it, honestly.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the past lives and why most people don't remember their past lives. I do, but again, I had an unconventional way of coming into the world. Like I do remember a lot of my past lives, but why do most people not remember their past lives?
Yeah. Well, according to my grandmother, we don't remember because it's an opportunity for advanced learning.
Right,
If we were to if we were to remember all of our past lives, it could be an impediment to actual growth because we could be
right,
distracted
right.
by things that have occurred in our past lives, by our failures, our
y-
limitations, or
Yeah,
things, maybe wrongs done to us.
yeah,
Think about, we accumulate enough memories in this one life to keep us from from evolving, to keep us
yes,
from awakening.
yes,
Imagine if we had the burden of every life and all of those memories. And so we aren't supposed to remember so that we could have a
right,
fast track to learning. We get a clean slate. It's a chance to start over and to engage with people wholeheartedly. And we
right,
wouldn't be able to if we could remember everything they had ever said or done, and to
right.
us. So that is the reason that we don't remember. And sometimes people do remember on accident, is what my grandmother says. And
Yeah,
really, the main reason that most people, like children who have these explicit past life memories, and many of them distressed because they're not with their family anymore, they're with this new family. She tells me that that is typically because they have reincarnated too soon outside
yeah,
of their time. And they
yeah,
have left their soul group doing so, because we are really supposed to stay with our soul group and wait and reincarnate. If we choose to reincarnate, do it again as a group so that we can work through our karmic cycles with the people we created our karma with, right?
yeah,
But people who are impetuous and come back too soon, they make things more difficult for themselves. And they have these
yeah,
memories because it's fresh on their minds. And they're also alienated from their soul group, and that's distressing. So it will set them back.
yeah,
But ultimately, they're still connected to their soul group, through consciousness, and one day will circle back to them,
right.
so they're not like eternally lost or anything.
Lost. Yes.
But that's the reason that some people, yeah, but that's the reason some people do remember their past lives.
Yeah, and I mean, I can second that. Like there have been times where there were things that I wanted to do, and I had an inherent fear of like, oh, I can't talk about. Currently, the perfect example is this of doing the speaking out on the spiritual stuff because I remember a past life of being burned at the stake, like for speaking on it. Like, do you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? So like, I can literally co-sign on exactly what you just said because and I was like, what is wrong with me? And I was hearing my spirit team and everyone telling me like, it's your past life stuff that's you're having to push
yeah,
through it because it's like ingrained in your soul. Like, this is what got me killed in a past life. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole
yeah,
trip, but I can
yeah,
definitely co-sign on that. Like that's really a thing of why a lot of people don't remember it because it inhibits you from wanting from doing the things that you're here to be doing this lifetime.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there are some things that, is kind of trivial, and it's okay to know those things. It wouldn't really set us back if we did. But some things really could, like you're saying, it could
right,
really hinder our progress. Like my grandmother has told me some things about my past life,
right.
but there are some things she won't.
It's off
She'll
limit.
say no say when I ask certain questions.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, it's funny. She said that in my past life, I owned a zoo. And I'm an animal person, so that
yeah.
doesn't surprise me at all that I'm at the zoo. And she says that I rescued a lion named Penelope, and she mauled me to death at the age of 45. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Oh,
And it's so
right.
frightening. And she said, but you learned your lesson. She said, in this life, you have dogs and not, no lions. And I was like, I didn't learn my lesson. I
I
just didn't
didn't
have the
learn
opportunity to buy a zoo.
anything.
That's
Right. I
oh,
didn't learn.
nothing,
I just don't have the
nothing.
funds to buy a zoo.
That's right.
Like
Yeah. It's like the
Brandy
universe just
said,
didn't give me the
right.
chance.
given the financial circumstances, I'd do it again.
Exactly. Exactly. Sign me up. And it's funny because I've always said in this life, before my grandmother popped through and said anything about that, I've always said I'll probably die trying to pet something I shouldn't because I love animals. I'm just really drawn to animals. And then my grandmother tells me that, and I'm like, holy smokes, I was
Right, like,
actually,
that's
that happened,
happened. Like, that's happened.
Yeah.
And then but it's the self-acceptance for me. Like, you're just like, I didn't learn my lesson at all." Like, it's just because I don't have the funds to own a zoo.
Right. I'm hard headed. And even now, there are things I know, like I could tell you, like conceptually, cognitively, I know this is my path forward. This is what I need to let go of. But then doing it, that's a whole
Yes.
other, like we have these compulsions and we're driven, by,
Yes.
yeah. So, yeah, we're all
Well,
continually in flux. And, thank be to God for these reincarnation options and, a chance to come into alignment because I don't know. I mean, one short life, I don't know. That would be
right.
a
No,
miracle if anyone could, integrate everything in one short
everything.
life.
Right. Like, there's no way. There's
Yeah.
no way. Every time people say that, they're like, "There's reincarnation isn't real." I just give the side glare at this point because I'm like, because man, listen, you haven't learned anything this lifetime. So how you gonna tell me that you only gonna have this one life? You didn't learn anything. You didn't learn anything. You're
Right.
absolutely coming back. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you failed every class. Anyways, that's how I look at it. Like, Earth is just one big school. But
Yeah.
yes.
That's right.
Yes. Brandy, thank you so much. This has been super amazing, reassuring, kind of validating, confirming on a whole bunch of levels. Again, I'm like, I don't feel so much like a purple unicorn, with the things that
Yeah,
I
it's,
have
well,
said.
yeah.
You have the same knowledge, So I appreciate you coming through.
Yeah,
I
it's
appreciate you being there. I appreciate you giving me this experience and everybody else. What else is there that you want to talk about? Where can
yeah.
people get your book also?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure to meet you and to have this conversation with you. So thank you, and you're doing great work. Holding space for this kind of information and sharing. So you are a light in the world, and so thank you for that. But people can find me at brandyanderson.net. That's my
Okay.
website. And from there are links to all of my socials.
Okay.
And my handle on all of the social accounts is Brandy the Mystic.
Okay.
And my book, Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife, is available on Amazon, and it's available in Kindle, paperback, and Audible. And it's a Quire publication.
Nice. So this is just my own personal question on this. How was that process for you getting it published? Like, was it scary? Was it intimidating? Was it difficult?
Yeah, so I felt really compelled to write the book because
Right.
my life had been so changed in such a meaningful way by the
Right.
stuff that my grandmother was able to share with me, and so I wanted to share it so that it might offer some peace and hope to others. So I was really motivated to write the book, and so writing it was, a pretty easy process. It just
Okay.
it just kind of flowed, and then when it became time to shop for publication, I did have a little, I don't know, a little hesitation about that because I knew like once this is out in the world, I knew that, the pushback, the criticism will come.
Right.
The more vocal I am about my experience,
Right.
the more pushback and that I would receive. So yeah, there was some I don't know, nervousness, I guess, about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Not nervousness that people would push back or maybe unfollow me. I don't really care so much
Hair.
about that. It's that I want to handle things well. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, am I ready? Am I at a place where I can,
Yeah.
handle that kind of thing well? Is it going to trigger me and cause me to spiral or something?
Yeah.
And so have I done enough inner work to be able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
put myself out there like that? Working on me is the first and most important, you know,
Yes.
that, I had some reservations in that respect. But also, as I shopped it for publication, finding a publisher for what I had written, it definitely wouldn't, even though it's spiritual, no Christian publisher or most Christian publishers wouldn't be open to what I was sharing.
Right.
So I kind of, I wasn't sure, go the self-publishing route, or I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to go with professionals who knew what they were doing, so that I didn't have the learning curve of figuring everything out on my end. And also,
Right.
I didn't have a big platform, so I thought it might be helpful to have a publisher help me in that regard.
Right.
And ultimately, I followed some people who, they own a publishing company. It's Keith Giles and Matthew DeStefano, and it's Choir Publishing. And I had been following them for a while, and they are in the Christian circles and the more progressive side of things. And they publish content that really rocks the boat, so they don't mind,
Right.
they're open to a multitude of ways of framing things or whatever. So I thought, hey, I'll reach out to them and see what happens. And so I did, and they were very open to it. And so I sent them the manuscript, and the rest is history, really. It's been a pleasure working with them. They're wonderful people to work with. I feel like the universe just aligned everything perfectly in that
Yeah.
regard, because, they were really the first publishers that I sent the manuscript to, and that's who I published with. So
Right.
it's been a pretty smooth process, actually.
I love that. I love that for you. And it is like you said, it's a scary thing, but the universe provided, what you needed when you needed it. And you followed the path. And now look.
Yeah. 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 I
Thank
mean,
you.
it's just, and that's what it's about, really. It's about letting go and allowing things to arise in the moment. So
Yes.
I don't always do that perfectly. Control is an illusion, but it's my favorite illusion.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, yeah. When I do
Uh,
let go, things work out much better than when I try to hang on.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. All right, Brandy, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. And I'm going to stop the recording, and then please just hang on for a second after.
Okay. Yeah.